See both teammates here. Jim, team captain, 9-0, playing Jessup Control. This is the list that won SCG Indy. Playing against the actual runner-up of Indy, Andrew Jessup on Infect. We go ahead and start the game from Jessup. It's a Gitaxian Probe on Davis. And we'll see Jim's hand. Jim, a Snapcaster Mage, a Lightning Bolt, a Lightning Helix, a Visions, an Ancestral Visions, a Nahiri, and a Scalding Tarn. It was on a 6-card hand, it looks like.
It's a reasonable 6. This hand could definitely have some issues against a deck as lean and efficient as Infect. Particularly, is going to need to catch his second and probably third land to actually play this game.
It'll be after the Gitaxian Probe, it'll be a breeding pool into Noble Hierarch for Jessup. So knocking himself all the way down to 15.
Yeah, so it looks like Jim picked up Celestial Colonnade as his draw for the turn. So he has the option to play that tapped or to just go for a Bolt on Noble Hierarch right away. And I like just going for the Lightning Bolt.
Yeah, well, he's going to go for a Wonder Up. He's actually going to go a different route here. Going to fetch for what I believe is Steam Vents and suspend Ancestral Visions. That gives him the opportunity to Bolt and Colonnade next turn.
Okay, yeah, if you take my line, you're kind of treating the Vision like a mulligan. The way that Jim is playing the game, he wants to try to take advantage of this draw 3 to put the game away when he starts to get in a winning position. The downside of this line is you can find yourself in a really awkward scenario if Andrew just has an Infect creature plus some kind of disruptive element on top of that on the following turn.
Turn 2, Jessup makes Viridian Corruptor. No artifacts for it to tag, but a 2/2 Infector nonetheless.
Still solid. Of course, Andrew had to tap out for this, so Jim should be able to Lightning Bolt the Corruptor here, as long as there's not a mutagenic growth in Jessup's hand.
So the Corruptor's a one of in Jessup's list, and if we've been watching him on coverage, I think he's had the Corruptor just about every game. I haven't yet to see I don't think I've seen it blow up an artifact just yet.
Yeah, he's cast it in pretty much every game and destroyed 0 artifacts. So it's just... It's better than a Grey Ogre. You know, it's a 4/2 for 2. I don't know if we... Alpine Grizzly?
4/2 for 3. Yeah, Alpine Grizzly. There you go. Jim now with some decisions. His draw for the turn was land number 3. It was a Scalding Tarn. So weighing between Lightning Helix plus that Tarn, or he can play Colonnade Lightning Bolt. Looks like he goes for the latter. We start out with Lightning Bolt on Viridian Corruptor. Of course, Jessup with a mutagenic growth might be able to save the Corruptor, and that's exactly what he'll do.
That's pretty brutal. That's very bad news for Jim.
And he plays Colonnade and passes, so the shields are down. He's going to take at least 3 poison. He's hoping it's not 10. Inkmoth Nexus fired. Might of Old Krosa on Corruptor. Pendelhaven pumps Inkmoth, so it's 6 damage from the Corruptor and 2 more from the Inkmoth. This is 8 poison on Jim Davis.
Yeah, so while that was not 10, Jim is still in 1 removal spell territory here. Because he used Lightning Bolt instead of Lightning Helix, on this turn with that land, he has access to Snapcaster Mage Lightning Bolt. So theoretically, he can get in front of the Corruptor and Lightning Bolt the Inkmoth Nexus, though Jessup still has 2 cards in hand, and Infect is very good against both of these things. A lot of the spells in his deck are live against this line.
Yeah, well, we see this Inkmoth Nexus just with something like either an Exalted trigger or a Pendelhaven activation would be lethal. Not to mention the Viridian Corruptor as a 2/2 is just lethal by itself.
Right, animating the Nexus with the Pendelhaven hanging out and the Corruptor being a 2/2 naturally, both of these creatures can be lethal attackers on this turn.
Go back to Jessup's side. He will cast Gitaxian Probe off Noble Hierarch, and I think he knows that he has Jim now. Snapcaster Mage, Mana Leak, Lightning Helix, and Nahiri. It's only 1 kill spell, so if Andrew makes 2 2-power attackers, I do think he has the game.
Well, the Snapcaster Mage can block the Corruptor, and the Lightning Bolt targets the Inkmoth Nexus.
You're right.
So the question is, what does Andrew have left in the tank?
Plays Misty Rainforest for the turn.
Now, if Andrew just attacks with the Corruptor, it suggests that he does not have any interactive spells left in his hand. Because this way, you make it so the Snapcaster Mage can't just block and trade with the Corruptor. You have to actually use the Lightning Bolt because of the Exalted trigger.
So Corruptor is a 3/3. It'll attack. Jim will fetch with Scalding Tarn. Now, so now Jim has, if he cast it aside, if he wants to Snapcaster or Lightning Helix here.
Right. Yeah, that tells it he has the Helix in hand, and that's probably where I would actually go here.
Jim's going to get Sacred Foundry. Well, I like this because he has Jim concerned about a pump spell. So it looks like Jim's might go for Snapcaster Mage on Lightning Bolt so that if Andrew has a pump spell, Jim still has a chump block available.
That's a good point. The upside here, too, is if the Snapcaster Mage survives. Jessup is already down to 13. He did cast Cataxian Probe with mana on this turn. His life total is not necessarily safe.
So from Jim, we see a Snapcaster giving Lightning Bolt flashback. Snapcaster will chump block the Corruptor, and now Lightning Bolt will be used to finish off the Corruptor on end step. Andrew did make Glistener Elf for the turn, so 2 creatures again.
Yeah, once again, 2 lethal attackers. This time, Jim only has 1 trick, unless he can top deck something here.
And how good is that play here from Jessup? If Jim had just Lightning Helixed, or say he hadn't chumped with the Snapcaster, he just bolted the Corruptor immediately, he would still have the Snapcaster stuck around, and he would be able to block next turn.
Right. So the thing with Jim there, he wants to make sure that he can get in a block in case something like, I don't know, Apostle's Blessing is hanging out to get the creature through, force a removal spell. You know, Jessup still had 2 cards in hand, so there's some 2-card combinations that can get past the Snapcaster and the Lightning Bolt.
He still could block and then bolt before damage.
Right, he could have done that as well. I'm kind of surprised he didn't make that line.
We go back over to Jessup. He's going to activate Inkmoth Nexus, swing with both 1/1s. And yeah, Jim has 1 Lightning Helix, but that's not enough. He knows that if he Lightning Helixes one of the creatures, Andrew Jessup will use Pendelhaven to pump the other, and that is game 1 for Andrew Jessup. Pulls that one out, and I think making it look easy there, but capitalizing on that Snapcaster turn from Jim Davis.
Yeah, you know, that turn, it looked like Andrew just kind of got Jim. Also, with Jim suspending the Ancestral Vision on turn 1 that never came off, on a mulligan to 6, he basically had mulligan to 5 in that game.
It's true. 5 on the draw against Infect can be hard for just about any player. So we'll go over to the sideboards. We'll look first over at Jim Davis's deck. He has 12 different cards available in the sideboard, so 2 Negates, 2 Spreading Seas, 2 Crumble to Dusts, and then a bunch of 1-ofs. We have Celestial Purge, Dispel, Wear Tear, Engineered Explosives, Anger of the Gods, Wrath of God, Vendilion Click, Stony Silence, and Izzet Staticaster.
So Spreading Seas is actually pretty good. You can turn off Inkmoth Nexus, so I like Spreading Seas a good amount. Crumble to Dust has a similar effect, though it's slow enough that I'd be surprised if we saw that one come in. Wear Tear can also tag an Inkmoth Nexus, but again, that's pretty narrow, though if you expect Wild Defiance out of the Infect player, you would bring that one in. I assume that Jim knows Jessup's list, so we'll see if he brings that one in. Anger of the Gods is good. It can clean up Noble Hierarchs as well as anything like a Blighted Agent, a Glistener Elf, and then Izzet Staticaster is possibly the best card that Jim has as a sideboard. The Staticaster can force action on almost every creature in Jessup's deck on every turn of the game.
Now, over on Jessup's side, he's got 3 Nature's Claims, 3 copies of Kitchen Finks, 2 Spell Pierce, 2 Dismember, 1 Dispel, 1 Twisted Image, 1 Grafdigger's Cage, 1 Spellskite, and a Dryad Arbor.
So Jim's deck has a ton of targeted removal. The Spellskite seems pretty solid here. I'd be curious to see if this is a Kitchen Finks matchup. It's just a resilient body against this heavy removal deck. I haven't really seen Kitchen Finks a lot of Infect sideboards. So.
Yeah, well, I do know that for Infect, Burn is one of their more difficult matchups. Sure. Now, right, it's curious because generally you don't play a creature that doesn't have the keyword Infect in the deck.
Right. Yeah, you have some avenues to actually go on a beatdown plan, though. Yeah, this is probably mostly just for blocking. Dispel is probably the best card coming in off of Jessup's sideboard here.
Yeah, I definitely see that, the Dispel, Spell Pierce kind of cards. Well, these players are going to get ready for Game 2 in really what we said has been a rematch of the last Modern Open here in Season 2. That was the SCG Indianapolis Open. Now, for all of Season 2, one thing we've been doing here on the SCG Tour for players playing in the events is we don't just have one playmat that you get for showing up at the events, but we have a different playmat for whatever format it is of your choice. So if you stand up for Standard, Modern, or Legacy, either Open or Classic, you get a format-specific playmat. So you see featured here, Sigarda's Heron's Grace. That's our Standard playmat. Is she now, as we've learned, the only remaining of the Avacyn Angels to still survive on Innistrad.
Things are a little scary on the plane.
Avacyn has been unmade. Her 2 sisters are much worse than that. But yes, you get that for signing up for any Standard, Open, or Classic. Now, on Modern Open, like the one today, gives away a copy of the card Ghost Quarter, also an Innistrad staple you see here. And for Legacy, it is Thalia, Guardian of Thraben. These were first given away at the Columbus Open in April and will be given away all the way through the Syracuse Open weekend on August 13th and 14th. So these open playmats are given with entry into any Season 2 Open or Classic. So make sure to pick yours up this summer before we go to Season 3.
Yeah, really gorgeous art in all of these mats. I like the expanded, the close-up art on the Ghost Quarter. When I look at that Innistrad Ghost Quarter, I didn't really see the ghost hanging around the fountain. It's pretty cool to see up close.
See a lot of Ghost Quarters up close. Generally, they're pretty good against my Primeval Titan decks. I would never use that playmat, but I would. But it is beautiful. I
mean, would using that playmat help to ward off opposing Ghost Quarters, or do you think it would invite them? It'd be like a Ghost Quarter.
My lands
magnet.
would be scared of it. They, my Valakuts don't want to be put on a Ghost Quarter playmat.
I wouldn't use the Thalia playmat for a similar reason.
Right, you're just like, that's not. I don't want to play Brainstorm into this. All right, Jim Davis this time on 7 cards and on the play. So we'll see how much that changes the game. Starts on a fetch land into Steam Vents in what I'd imagine is another Ancestral Vision. That should be Serum Visions.
Yeah, some kind of vision.
Some sort of visions. Have the wrong kind. How nice is it against Infect that a deck like Jeskai can just fetch for Ravnica duels at will?
I'm pretty aggressive about fetching Ravnica duels anyway, but in this matchup, you just kind of YOLO it. Untapped all the time, every turn.
This is an interesting one. After drawing, Jim had his Scry 2, which was Mana Leak and Lightning Helix. Now, normally Mana Leak on the play is a really good card. You saw Jim put the Mana Leak on the bottom, but keep the Lightning Helix.
Yeah, that suggests that Jim probably has a hand that's very good at playing to the board, at which point he's probably using his mana in a way that doesn't really allow him to play on the stack. Mana Leak is pretty efficient, but in this matchup in particular, spending 2 mana to interact is somewhat inefficient.
Glistener Elf is the turn 1 play for Jessup. When your opponent has something like Glistener Elf, I suppose holding up Mana Leak becomes a lot less attractive.
Yeah, and it also looks like Jim already has a negate in hand. And he has the creature removal, Lightning Bolts, Lightning Helixes, Anger of the Gods, stuff to deal with creatures. And then negate pretty much does what Mana Leak would be doing anyway. And redundant copies of something that's kind of inefficient, not what Jim's looking for.
Looking at Jim's hand, it looks like he has 3 more lands, a Lightning Helix, a Lightning Bolt, a Snapcaster Mage, and a negate. Plays land number 2 at Scalding Tarn and passes. Now, normally we'll see players, if they're committed to Lightning Bolt or Lightning Helix, do it on their own turn so that if pump spells show up, they don't take too much damage. A swing from Jessup, and Jim goes ahead and takes 1 poison.
Yeah, given that Jim didn't go for the Lightning Bolt on his turn, that suggests to me that he's just kind of very confident in his hand and the position as the turns unfold. He also has Anger of the Gods in hand, so he's thinking maybe, Andrew will do something like cast Blighted Agent or a Noble Hierarch on this turn, and then he can get more value that way.
Okay, so yeah, we can set up for something a lot bigger there. Jessup commits a second Glistener Elf to the table after dealing the 1 point of Infect, leaving up Breeding Pool, so Jim will have to respect cards like Spell Pierce and Dispel. And we'll see if he goes for a Lightning Helix on the end step here.
You see on the far left of Jim hand, there's a red card there.
Yeah.
I believe it to be Anger of the Gods.
I was thinking it was Lightning Bolt, but now we look at it again, you're right. And that would certainly explain why he doesn't want to fire off that Lightning Helix right away.
Yeah. Of course, now there's a lot of tension here because Jessup has that blue mana.
Yeah.
Spell Pierce would be a disaster.
If Jim goes for Anger and it gets Spell Pierced, he's probably dead on the untap.
And you can try to bait that with Lightning Helix, though there's really no reason for Jessup to Spell Pierce Lightning Helix when you have 2 Infectors on the table.
On end step, this is still Andrew's turn 2. Jim will go ahead and use that Scalding Tarn to find Sacred Foundry, so Jim goes to 14. And it looks like he'll use the Lightning Helix here. Points it at one of the Glistener Elves, and now the question is whether or not Jessup defends. It looks like his defense spell is Apostle's Blessing. He has one of those in hand. Not even going to use it. Just puts the Glistener Elf into the graveyard.
Yeah, he has a backup, and he's aware Jim has that Is It Static Caster in his sideboard. He has Anger
Oh,
of the
wow,
Gods. Yeah. There's much more disastrous things that could happen if he uses his interactive spell on that window.
Wow, Staticaster, because he can't even spell pierce a Staticaster.
He sure can't.
Now, I think Andrew does have a copy of Twisted Image in his hand.
Okay, that would take care of Status Caster. Not after it killed your Glistener Elves.
Right, I think Jim would still take the trade. So Jim's draw for the turn a copy of Nahiri the Harbinger. And now some mana sequencing from Jim. He has lands 3 and 4 to play that Nahiri on curve, but one of the two of them is a Celestial Colonnade, so he has to decide when he wants to take that turn off. He decides not now. He'll shock first Hallowed Fountain. And play main phase Snapcaster Mage, flashing back Serum Visions. Okay. Draws a Flooded Strand. The Scry 2 shows Path to Exile Lightning Bolt. That's got to be a, yeah,
that's
both on top.
Pretty quick top.
That is exactly what he wants to see in this matchup.
Yeah, so the Snapcaster Serum Visions on that turn is pretty aggressive. Jim figures there's not a lot of ways for Jessup to make the Glistener Elf connect in the face of Snapcaster Mage. He'll at least be able to chump block against most cards in Jessup's deck.
This is so neat. You look at Jessup's hand. He has all of the reactive spells we've been talking about. So he attacks with Glistener Elf. Jim blocks, and Andrew uses Apostle's Blessing to give the Glistener Elf protection from blue. Saying he still has that spell. He actually does have a Spell Pierce in hand.
Okay. The Spell Pierce is going to start losing value fairly quickly.
Yeah, I think he'll always be able to get the Nahiri in Jim's hand, but the fight is probably, if Jim gets to resolve all these negates, this negate, this Lightning Bolt, this Anger of the Gods. Yeah, if all these resolve, I don't think the Nahiri matters.
Yeah, with this Anger coming down this turn, I'd be pretty interested in casting Spell Pierce right now.
So Jim playing Anger of the Gods with 1 mana up. The mana's Flooded Strand, so it gives Jim access to the Path to Exile he put on top. And you're right, Jessup will go ahead and Spell Pierce the Anger. Jim can't pay.
And if you use the Strand here to go and find mana to cast Path, you do lose the Lightning Bolt that Jim has on top of his deck right now, which is a card that I believe he pretty strongly wants to draw.
I'd gladly take another point of poison to draw a Lightning Bolt in Jim's spot. Yeah.
I would definitely wait until Jessup really forces the action. Well, it looks like he's going for it right now.
Yeah, he's really respecting the damage output from Infect here.
With 3 cards in hand, there are ways that Jessup can force the action and kill Jim even through Path to Exile. So this is a fine play.
Pathway the Glistener Elf. So this leaves the remaining 3 cards in Jim's hand as Negate, Nahiri, and Celestial Colonnade. Likely play next turn is just Nahiri Colonnade.
Yeah. Go to well, the Glistener Elf should be presumably exiled here. We'll see if Jessup's able to fight over that. If not, then Nahiri could exile it on the following turn, assuming that Jim doesn't just die. Jessup's up to something.
Touches another Breeding Pool. Does he have another Spell Pierce?
I think
my.
Well, it could be something a lot less good than that. I think there's a Twisted Image that he wants to just cycle.
Okay, yeah, he'll Twisted Image the 1/1. Just draw a card, and then it looks like, yes, it will be exiled. He'll get a land. Fortunately for Andrew, the cycling off Twisted Image got him another Infector, which for, I think, the 7th game in a row with Andrew is going to be a Viridian Corruptor that's going to destroy 0 artifacts.
Yep.
That's just what the card does. We play it 'cause we just need that 3-mana 2/2.
Yeah. Alpine Grizzly is generally considered a modern all-star.
He'll Gitaxian Probe Jim. So we see the 3 cards. It is Negate, Nahiri, Colonnade.
The draw for turn for Jessup, I believe he picked up a Dispel.
He did.
Which is a solid draw, though it's not going to do anything against Nahiri.
Plays the Corruptor, leaving up blue. This will be interesting. We've seen Jim parry the Infect deck with Lightning Bolts and Path to Exiles, and now we're just going to see how well Nahiri plays in the matchup.
depending what Jim picked up here, his action might just be to cast a Nahiri. Leaving up Negate is going to save him from dying to something like Become Immense second pump spell, if that's the case. Looks like they're doing some counting. Looks like they're trying to figure out how many cards Andrew Jessup's supposed to have in his hand, verify some information here.
When he played the Twisted Image, he had 3 cards remaining in hand, so he would have drawn to 4, played Corruptor to 3, puts him back to 3, played Probe. He should have 3 cards in his hand and just has 2. So I believe, and the table judge will confirm this, I believe that he may not have actually drawn off the Probe.
Yeah, that's definitely something that you want to have cleaned up. Not exactly a game action that you're allowed to miss.
Well, if you look at Jim's, you can't resolve half your spell. If your spell says draw a card, you draw a card.
All right, and it looks like he didn't draw, and there we're back to good.
Spellskite's the card drawn. Looks like Jessup with Spellskite, Pierce, Dispel in hand.
And, luckily, that's something that he wouldn't have sequenced differently. He certainly wouldn't have wanted to cast Spellskite on this turn and Corruptor on the following turn.
Yeah, so the resolution from the judge is that he will go ahead and Andrew will have the card. A game rules violation warning is assessed. Those are the kind of thing that doesn't affect anything in the game right now. If Andrew gets 3 or 4 of them over the course of the day, then penalties will start to accrue.
Yep. That would be a heck of a thing to get a game loss over, failing to draw cards.
I like my cards to be worse. Now, Jim played the Colonnade there, but he actually didn't go for the Nahiri just yet.
Yeah, he's just leaving up that Negate. He's just afraid of dying. A land on the following turn will enable him to do both of the things, Nahiri and Negate. And also with a tapped creature, he'll be able to exile that right away instead of just looting, or rummaging rather, with the Nahiri.
So Jessup will attack with the Corruptor. Jim goes to 3 poison. He draws. It is Path to Exile. And now it's interesting here. He can play that Nahiri. Now, Jessup has a Spell Pierce, so Jim has to really play right. And I love this. Makes land number 6 before going for Nahiri. Great play by Jim.
Yep. Gets to leave up the Negate here.
Yeah, well, there's a temptation to not do it because you may want to discard it away, but Jim, no, he's going to play it. Now let's see whether Jessup pierces. And this is a great Nahiri. It doesn't even hit. Spellskite can't even redirect because the Skite's not tapped.
Right. It's only untapped enchantments that Nahiri can tag.
Enchantment, tapped creature, or tapped artifact.
In one of the most often confused lines of text on a Planeswalker. Not easy to do, mind you.
Right. So Jim just gets to play. He gets to play this. His remaining hand is Negate Path to Exile.
Yeah, so he'll be able to cast one of those on this turn. Now, Jessup does have that Inkmoth Nexus that he played last turn, so Jim is far from out of the woods. Nahiri won't be able to interact with that.
Yep, the Corruptor goes into exile. Go back to Jessup. Skite in play. Creature land in play. He will start by casting Gitaxian Probe, and now he's feeling the damage a bit. You see how he's at 9?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He also has a Spellskite that presumably he might want to pay life for at some stage in this game.
I like how the Infect deck is Phyrexian in 2 different ways. Not only is it putting poison on you, but it's aggressively using Phyrexian mana.
It's almost as if that block had multiple degenerate mechanics.
And he off the Gitaxian Probe, he draws Become Immense. He'll go ahead and Become Immense the Inkmoth and go right at Jim with it.
And this is going to kill Jim. He has Spellskite and Dispel backup. Jim has Path or Negate.
What a huge draw for Jessup off the Probe. So it's a 7/7. Yeah, Jim can negate, and Jessup, he's got him. It's Dispel. Dispels away the negate, and that's game. Andrew Jessup takes the match 2-0 and moves to 10-0.
Very impressive. Well played by Jessup there.
That was, boy, he had just a very small window there, and he made it count.
Yeah.
That was a huge draw.
I don't know if Jim really could have done anything. Yeah, even if he doesn't cast Nahiri, he just has Negate and Path, but then Jessup also just has the Corruptor. He was just choked.
Jim